I've never been the type to get scared easily. But that night, something changed. It was late, the house was silent, and I was alone. Then I heard it, a faint thump from downstairs. At first I thought it was nothing, but when the footsteps kept coming, I knew something was wrong, and I wasn't alone anymore. You ever have one of those moments where you can't quite tell if you're awake or dreaming? Like, your brain's trying to convince you that everything's fine, but your gut is screaming that something's wrong. That's exactly what happened to me the night I heard footsteps in my basement. I live alone in a pretty old house, nothing crazy. Just a quiet little place at the end of a cul-de-sac. It's the kind of house that creaks and groans all the time, you know? So I've always been pretty good at tuning out weird noises. But that night was different. It was about 2 a.m. I was lying in bed, scrolling through Reddit. Ironically, reading creepy stories, trying to freak myself out. The vibe was perfect. My room was dark, just the soft glow of my phone lighting up my face, and my dog, Max, was curled up at the foot of the bed, snoring away. I was completely relaxed. Everything felt calm. And then, I heard it. Thump. I froze. I mean, it was so soft at first I thought maybe I imagined it. Houses settle, right? Wood expands and contracts, and sometimes there's a little popping or cracking here and there. I told myself that's all it was. Nothing to worry about. But then, thump, thump, thump. This time it wasn't just the house creaking. The sound was deliberate, methodical, like someone was walking around down there. My dog Max perked up and growled low in his throat. That's when I realized it was coming from the basement. The basement. Now, I don't even like going down there in the daytime. It's this cold, unfinished space with a cracked concrete floor, and there are some old shelves that I've never bothered to clean. It's just one of those places that gives off a weird, uneasy vibe. You ever have that feeling like someone's always watching you? That's how I feel every time I go down to the basement. But of course, I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was nothing. Still, Max wouldn't stop growling. He was standing at the top of the stairs, his body rigid, his hackles raised. I'd never seen him like that before. At that point, my heart was starting to race. I thought about just locking the door and waiting until morning. After all, it was probably nothing, right? But then I heard something that made my stomach twist into knots. Footsteps. Not just random noises. No, these were slow, deliberate steps, each one heavier than the last. They were moving across the basement floor, making their way toward the stairs. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you do in a situation like this? Do you call the cops? Do you go check it out? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Maybe someone had broken in, or maybe it was some kind of prank. Though who would be messing around in my basement at 2 a.m.? The footsteps got closer. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Max was barking now, more frantic, and I was shaking so hard I could barely keep the flashlight steady. I took a slow, cautious step toward the stairs. The light flickered for a second, and then I aimed it down toward the basement door. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Is someone there?" There was nothing. No answer. Just silence. I stood there, just listening. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it might explode. I took a shaky step down the stairs. Another step. The beam of my flashlight barely lit up the bottom of the stairs, but I could just about see enough to know that there was no one standing there. The basement looked the same as it always did. Diamond Soy's empty. But then, there was this feeling. An off feeling. Like something was wrong. It wasn't just the noise anymore. It was the way the air felt. Cold. Pressed in on me. Like the room itself was holding its breath. I kept walking, trying to force myself to go deeper into the basement. I made it to the bottom, and that's when I saw it. The door to the crawl space, the one under the stairs, was wide open. I never opened that door. Ever. It's this tiny, dark space, pitch black, full of cobwebs and dust. I've always been too freaked out to go near it. I keep meaning to close it, but I never do. And now, here it was, wide open. I could feel my pulse racing. I didn't want to go any further. I just stood there, staring at that door. Max was barking like mad, his eyes locked on the crawl space. He wouldn't stop. He was practically jumping at the door, trying to get at whatever was in there. But then I heard it again. Footsteps. This time they were closer. Behind me. I spun around, my flashlight flickering, heart in my throat, and for just a second I saw something. A shape, a shadow. It was standing in the corner of the basement, barely visible, like it was waiting. When I aimed the flashlight back toward it, though, there was nothing. Just empty space. That's when I knew. Something wasn't right. I didn't even think. I grabbed Max, bolted up the stairs, and locked the basement door behind me. My hands were shaking, my mind was spinning. I couldn't sit down, I couldn't even breathe. I paced back and forth with a baseball bat in my hands, waiting for something, anything, to happen. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could think about was the footsteps, the crawlspace door, the shadow I saw, or thought I saw. Morning came, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. Maybe it was just my imagination, I thought. Maybe I was just tired. So I went downstairs to check the basement again, just to be sure. The basement was exactly the same. The door to the crawlspace was closed, and everything else seemed normal. Nothing was out of place. But then I noticed something. There, on the floor by the shelves, was a single muddy footprint. It wasn't mine.